Real quick before we get started with the F-15E, there is currently a 50% off sale on select packs in the War Thunder store right now. If any of these packs interest you, I would really appreciate if you use my link found in the description down below. You won't get 3% off this time, but I will get a 3% cut of whatever you buy, as well as you will get my decal as shown on screen here, so I would really appreciate it. Also, the microphone that I use is the Blue Yeti, and let me tell you, it's absolutely terrible. Never buy one. It's only given me problems ever since I've owned one. And this time it's especially screwing up, so I'm just going to be buying a new microphone soon. So I apologize if the audio on this video sounds completely scuffed. I'm doing my best to work with the current microphone I have. So let's talk about the F-15E and what is exactly the controversy. Well, it seems like every time GAIJIN adds a new F-15, there is something that the community has to say about it, and not necessarily for bad reason either. In this case, we have the F-15E, which, by the way, I think looks absolutely gorgeous. I love this model. Very well done on GAIJIN's part. And I did misspeak in the Israeli F-15E video where I said that they carry the exact same ground strike ordnance, and that's just not true. The F-15E in the American tech tree actually carries Mavericks, AGM-65Ds, I believe, and these will be extremely useful in ground RB. Whereas the Israeli tech tree one does not get access to such a weapon. It's stuck with only guided bombs, which are also good weapons, but I think the Mavericks alone will make the American F-15E better in ground RB than the Israeli one. That's not the controversy here though. The controversy stems from the fact that the Israeli F-15 has the upgraded engines, the 229s, and the American one only has the 220s. The upgraded engines are a big deal. The 229s give you about 4,000 kilograms of force more thrust total, 2,000 more per engine. And when you're taking the extra weight that the F-15Es bring over the F-15C, that extra kilograms of force and thrust is extremely needed. Maybe extremely is a bit of an exaggeration. It's still an F-15, it's still extremely fast in straight lines and whatnot, but you do really notice the extra thrust of the Israeli one. Granted, it's not finished, so especially when you get to really high speeds right now on the dev server, it just takes off and starts zooming. That's not going to be the case, at least in a few weeks after the update. Like I said in that video, I don't trust GAIJIN to really fix that in a timely manner. But that plane just does not have drag modeled right now, and the thrust curve seems to be way too high. That being said, even on low speeds, like when you're taking off from the airfield and whatnot, you can see the difference between the two engines, and having the upgraded 229s on the American F-15E would be pretty nice. Why doesn't it have them? Simply because GAIJIN says that they don't want to give it the 229s. And why is that? Well, they say that they want to make the F-15C the primary air-to-air F-15 in the US tech tree, and they think that by giving the F-15E the upgraded engines, it would kind of just overshadow the F-15C in all regards, both ground strike capability, obviously, as well as air-to-air. Now I'm going to try to give you my thoughts on this as unbiased as I possibly can. It seems like a lot of people, particularly probably American main players, think that I'm just an anti-NATO player, Russian sympathizer, and I'm always complaining about NATO planes and never cry when Russians get something overpowered. That's my average comment section whenever I make one of these types of videos. And so my thoughts on this situation are this. I understand where they're coming from with a statement like that. Obviously, the F-15C being the air superiority fighter in the US tree right now, you would want it probably to not just get simply overshadowed by a new F-15 and kind of make the entire point of grinding the F-15C useless. If the F-15E is just going to be straight up better, why even grind the two separate lines? I get that stance. What I don't understand, however, is the Israeli tech tree is in the exact same position, but the same logic does not apply. Granted, it couldn't apply even if they wanted it to. The Israeli F-15E does not have and never had the 220 engines. They only ever had the 229s, so they have no choice but to add that one with the upgraded engines. That still doesn't take away from the fact that the Baz Mushapar is still in the tech tree, it's still the F-15C, and that, by their logic, is what is supposed to be the premier air-to-air fighter. So I'm just really not understanding why it's okay for one of the tech trees to carry on in this way where the F-15E gets upgraded engines, but it's not okay for the US tech tree. And like I said, I do understand why it's simply not possible for the Israeli tech tree, but I really don't think the F-15E getting the 229 engines is going to break the game at all, and I don't think it's going to necessarily make the F-15C useless or not worth grinding. Sure, maybe in your average ARB situation, there's really no difference between the two, and you might rather just have the F-15E for that a little bit more straight line acceleration and thrust to weight, gives you a little bit more speed to sling off some AMRAAMs, but in the end of the day, it's really not a huge deal, and I would much rather see some consistency from GAIJIN rather than picking and choosing where they want their rules to apply. If game balance was a factor here, then sure, if giving the F-15E in the US tech tree its upgraded engines was going to be something that destroys the integrity of top tier and makes it unfun to play anything else, sure, I would get it. But I really don't see that happening. And of course, as I said, the Israeli F-15 right now is not finished. Do not expect that kind of flight performance within the coming weeks of the update. Sure, for the short time being, it probably will break top tier if it comes to the live server with that kind of speed, but it won't be for long. There's also the stance of perhaps they're trying to balance the F-15Es themselves, with the Israeli one not having access to the AGM-65 Mavericks, and the US one does. That's a big deal, particularly for tank RB. Having Mavericks and GBUs is definitely something that is a plus for your aircraft, whereas the Israeli one only having GBUs is missing out. And so I could also understand the logic of trying to make a reason to play the F-15Es between the two of them themselves. The F-15E in the Israeli tech tree having the better engines and the better flight performance, overall just going to be a little bit better in the air-to-air role, where the F-15E in the US tech tree is much better for close air support having those Mavericks. That's pretty much the controversy in a nutshell. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'm going to finish out the video just kind of talking about the F-15E as a whole, as a plane, and kind of how it's different from the F-15C. Well, starting off with the radar, it is the exact same radar in terms of air-to-air capabilities. Neither of them have an advantage over the other. However, the F-15E does have the air-to-ground radar modes, which if you're going to do close air support is a good thing. If you're not doing close air support, I would argue it's a bad thing because it's just more radar modes you have to cycle through while trying to get to the one you actually want. It has the exact same amount of countermeasures as the F-15C, unless you take the targeting pod, in which you lose one of your 120 countermeasure slots. However, if GAIJIN models it properly, you should still be able to have chaff in that slot even with the targeting pod, so we'll see what they end up doing. Another notable difference is the F-15E carries about half of the amount of ammo as the F-15C, not in these clips because these are older, but in the newer dev updates it does have half the ammunition. And lastly, flight performance wise, it's just worse than the F-15C right now because it does not have the upgraded engines, but it has all of the extra weight. If it does end up getting the upgraded engines, I'm told it should perform pretty similarly. All of your matchups are going to be exactly the same. If you're talking E versus C, the C should win in short turns, but if you get into like a sustained rate, they're pretty much equal. So let me know what you think about the F-15E in the comments below, and I'll see you.